What's the nature of your emergency?
Good morning, police, fire, military, and families. And to everybody who is listening in on the Tactical Living Podcast, I'm your host, Ashley Walton, joined by our guest today, Miss Lori Hodges. And thank you so much for waiting as long as you did. Yes, dogs are better than people for sure. Thank you, Lori, for waiting as long as you did to be able to come onto our show. And we are so happy that you're here.
All right, good morning.
Now, you have 30 years of experience working as a paramedic and an emergency manager, and I'm really excited to get into your story. But first, we are doing a giveaway. We're going to be doing a 20-piece barbecue grill set. So good morning. You could get that to your house and then invite me over for a barbecue. And then Lori is also going to be sending you a copy of her book. So Lori, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your story and how you even kind of became somebody who works in the field that you do now?
Well, actually, it's a funny story. I was at a stoplight in Las Vegas when I was in my early 20s, not knowing really what I wanted to do with my life, contemplating, where do I go from here? And an ambulance drove by running emergent. And all of a sudden I saw a life that I could have, because I never saw a life at an office, 8 to 5 type of thing. And so I went to a Grateful Dead show that weekend, and I decided I was going to give it some time, think about it. And at that show, a woman in front of me, she took some LSD and had a seizure. And I didn't have any medical training, so I just kind of helped her so she didn't hit her head on the metal railing. And then I followed her down to the Grateful Dead has their own medics. I followed them down to the medical center, and I watched them work the rest of the show. So in a way, the Grateful Dead kind of saved my life, because that was the sign I needed. And I moved back to Colorado within about 30 days and was enrolled in EMT school. And then from there, I became a firefighter, a volunteer firefighter, and then a paramedic for about 10 years. And then I moved into the emergency management field and have been there for about 20 years now.
So you're in a group with everybody that can relate to some of your experiences. And I'm really curious, because I learned that you did that for 10 years. You started when you were about 25. So what led you out of working as a paramedic and then into emergency management instead?
I really enjoyed the larger scale coordination of multiple agencies having to come together and solve complex problems. And so I worked on an incident management group at the time. It wasn't called a team. And at the time, I just really loved that. I loved the fact that fire, law, EMS, also all of our nonprofit partners came together during the larger events. So I really wanted to learn more about that. And that's when I learned about emergency management. And at the time, there wasn't really any school for emergency management. So I went to school and got a individualized degree here in Denver. They allow you to do that. And so I got a degree in emergency management, and then I ended up getting a job as a emergency manager in Park County, which is a large county with a small population here in Colorado.
Now, working in emergency management, like the leadership stressors that a lot of first responders face is quite a bit unique, because it's like your top level and you choose to or you choose not to. So what's some of the variances that you saw by like shifting out of it, for example?
What do you mean?
Like being a paramedic and maybe some of the stressors that people see with leadership and then going into management instead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. With paramedicine, obviously you're right there. You see everything, you're with the patient. It's more of the life and death, right? And so kind of removing myself from that allowed me to, I think, deal with traumatic events a little bit easier, because I wasn't there on the scene, seeing everything. I was hearing about it, but that's a very different thing than when you're actually working in the field.
Got it. Yeah, he is working night shift. He'll be home soon and snoring. Jim, I hope that you're doing okay. When it comes to another thing that I heard you talking about, it was very interesting, because you were talking about COVID, and you made mention of the fact that the book that you have now, which is called Shaking in the Forest, Finding Light in the Darkness, you were going to name it Collateral Beauty of Chaos. And I loved that saying. I was curious to know why you didn't name it that. And I was also really interested for you to share the story about how what that phrase even means.
Yeah, so the core idea of Shaking in the Forest is about finding beauty in chaos. And so the entire book is about the collateral beauty of chaos. So it's looking at these horrible events and the chaos that ensues from it. But we learn so much from those events. COVID is a perfect example of that, where we learned so much from COVID because it was such a traumatic event for everybody. It shook kind of our foundation, right? And so we had to think about things differently. We had to solve problems differently. And so the reason I chose not to call it Collateral Beauty of Chaos is just because I think Shaking in the Forest was a little bit catchier. And I don't know if people would have gotten the title without reading the book, So within the book, I kind of talk about how there is beauty in trauma and there's beauty in chaotic events. It's all about how we approach it, right? And how we look at that trauma and see what the lesson was that we learned from it after the fact.
Sometimes when I talk to first responders, whether it's a client or as a friend or even my husband, people will always say, I have a dark sense of humor. Yeah. What's your take on humor as a coping mechanism, especially as you're working as a first responder?
I actually think that humor is probably the first and the most important coping mechanism for emergency responders. I have never met a first responder that didn't really have a dark sense of humor. After the worst calls that we ran, we always got together as a crew, especially if everybody knew that it was a really bad call, or if we knew the person that was on the call. We would always get together and share a meal. And in those meals, we would laugh, we would joke around. And I think that was our way of processing the information that we just had and coping with it as a group.
What's the importance of doing that together?
Well, I think together it shows you that people understand, people get you. They're also going to support you and just have your back when you're in those bad moments. I don't think we do a very good job in our field of talking about trauma. In a lot of cases, we try to keep it inside. We try to be tough. It's part of the the personality of an emergency responder. So in those moments where you get together with peers, people who have been through what you've been through, they can understand it. And as you joke about it and as you kind of try to talk through it, it allows you to process in a way that you wouldn't probably have any other way, because you would probably go home. You don't want to talk about it with your family very much. You might not have a support system outside of the emergency services. So I think that's the biggest benefit to it.
Yeah, and on some notes that I received when I received the request for you to come on the show, it says here, mental health and humor, the critical role that humor plays in maintaining mental health in high stress professions. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, if you, during COVID, I started every day with something fun. I started every day with a quote or some kind of a story that really got people laughing or having them relax a little bit. And I think that the tension in the room, especially in an emergency operations center where you have 120 people, the tension in the room can be very high when you know people's lives are on the line. So anything that we can do to decrease that tension, decrease the temperature, is going to help the entire room as a whole. So we kind of make it a role of the emergency manager to come in, and I am purposefully stop myself at the door. I make sure that I'm in the right headspace, that my emotions aren't high when I walk into an emergency operations center. I have a smile on my face. And then I walk around the room and I talk to people. I laugh with them. We tell stories. All of that is purposeful. It tries to help ensure that that people, when they are in a high stress, they start to see how they can use that humor, and they can have humor in those bad events too. I mean, some people feel like you can't be, happy, or you can't laugh when you're in a traumatic event, but that laughter actually helps you decrease your stress level, so you're more productive and you're able to move through that event. So we do that purposely in our EOC, just to try to keep people working, keeping them healthy and strong.
We definitely need more of that. When I was listening to another interview that you had done, I had heard you discussing that there are other strategies that you have personally adopted when you're going into a high stress situation. I was just wondering if you can maybe share some of those tools.
Sure. The first is the first rule, I think, of emergency services, which is no running, no yelling. And so you have to go in slowly. I have to slow everything down as much as I can. And I'm a fast talker. I'm a fast mover. Most emergency services folks are too. So slowing everything down, again, decreases that temperature. So that's the first thing that I do. The other thing is the tactical breathing. I don't know if you guys have talked about that before, but it's really slowing your breathing down at the same time. Very purposefully slowing your breathing down. And then, like I said, I stop at the door and I make sure that I take my time to check how I look. I did this as a paramedic too, because when I was first a paramedic, nobody saw me as in charge. I didn't look like I was in charge. I looked like I, was the rookie in the room, and I was. And so I started to watch people, and I watched what worked. And the people who really took their time, they looked like they were in charge, they were calm and collected. Those are the people that people turned to when they were in a bad place. The doctors that I worked with, the more serious the patient, the further away from the patient they were in the room. They would sit in a chair in the corner if it was a bad patient. And I used to wonder about that, but it's because they wanted to see the entire room. They wanted to see the space. They wanted to see what was going on. It was a very deliberate action. So those are some of the things that I do. I also have a lot of techniques now that I use to really, I didn't really understand the value of slowing everything down. It allows me to go out of fight or flight into my prefrontal cortex, which allows me to think better. So all of those actions can help anybody any day of the week if they're facing trauma, is to figure out a way to slow down. And the best thing I've found is the room scan, which is where you take, not when you're on a call, but you take some time and you go from one part of the room to the other part of the room, and you look and you experience every single thing that's in that room. It takes a long time if you're in a busy room, but all of that does is it gets you out of your fight or flight into a good place, slows everything down, and get your stress level down. So if you face anxiety, great tool for that.
I'm thinking about the other one that you had shared where you're scanning your body, and something that you said is like, notice a part of your body where you don't notice any feeling. I had never heard that one before.
Yeah, so there's the 5 senses one, which is like name off 5 things you see, name off 4 things you hear, name off 3 things you can touch, whatever. And then the other one is, yes, you scan your body. What I do if I'm in a meeting or if I'm feeling stress in any way, and this is something you can do when you're actually on a call, is you try to feel like the hair on your arm, right? Or you try to, find a part of your body that you cannot feel anything. And again, it's the same basic concept. It takes you out of an anxiety brain or the monkey brain, and it puts you into a place where you can calm yourself and you can think more clearly. So if you face any kind of anxiety, or even if you're just on a stressful call, that's a quick thing that you can do to just start to reset your brain and see where, make sure that you're thinking correctly.
It's so interesting, Lori, because I was thinking about you talking about being in that emergency, like a critical situation, and how observant you are, and how going way back, that's kind of how it all started with your observancy, with, seeing an ambulance and so forth. So it's really cool to kind of see how, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. Yeah, I like the stop method as well. Yeah, so that's just really interesting to see how that all kind of came full circle for you.
Yeah, I think a lot of emergency responders believe in intuition. You believe in the gut feeling. You hear that a lot from emergency responders. And I believe that signs are out there. So I'm just always watching out for those signs to see, is somebody trying to tell me something that I need to pay attention to? So that's what the ambulance was. And then since then, I try to really, I always listen to my intuition. It's never steered me astray.
Yeah. And the more we pay attention, the more we can pay attention, which is so, like, we get the amnesia effect sometimes to, like, not remember to pay attention, but I like seeing that people actually do. And right. I'm always really interested as to how somebody became an author, especially when they're working as a first responder. So how did that happen?
Well, I wrote a book when I was a paramedic. It was a fictional novel. It's a historical fiction called Sweet Twisted Pine. And I wrote it just because you're working 24-hour shifts. You have some downtime. And I wanted to write a novel. It was kind of like a check the bucket list box. And then Shaking in the Forest came about because I've always been an avid journaler, and I've written down everything since I was about 12 years old. So I went back through my journals and I read some of the calls I was on, and I kind of wanted to write a funny book about some of the calls that I ran. Cause again, humor is kind of a core concept in the emergency services. But what it turned into is, I started each chapter with a call, but then I talked about the lessons that I learned from that call and how I moved through over the years, my own trauma through those lessons that I learned as a paramedic. So that was kind of like my learning ground from 25 to 35, really trying to figure out who I am, who I want to be. And so I just started to kind of write. I'm a very chaotic writer. I'm chaotic in my life, so it matches. So I just wrote whatever came to mind. I wrote different stories, and then I patched it all together. And it did become a book really about facing hardship, facing horrible events, and how we become stronger from it, from the lessons that we learn.
As an emergency manager and with how much experience that you have, what are some of the things that you've identified that might be helpful for people to kind of manage their work-life balance?
Well, one, I think that emergency services folks, emergency management folks, people who are public servants, they love what they do. So I think work-life balance is a very difficult thing because it's not like you just do an 8 to 5, you check in, your time clock and you check out. For us, it's a lifestyle. So for me, I had to find ways in which I could enjoy my work outside of work without it becoming work. I don't know if that makes sense, but enjoy the things that I love most about being an emergency manager or being in emergency services, figure out ways that I can have hobbies and goals outside of that, that really help me to manage that work life. So I don't know if I'm describing that very accurately, but I do think it's hard to turn it off, but I do think it's incredibly important to turn it off. So finding those ways in which you can, again, turn off your brain in one fashion and turn it on in another. Like creativity is one way for me. Art, painting, anything that has any kind of creativity to it really helps me de-stress, but everybody has a different way. Sports is another one that I think a lot of emergency responders do, just to kind of get out of their brain.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if you were to sit next to that 25-year-old Lori who's just getting ready to become a first responder, now with all of this experience, what advice would you give?
The core piece of advice that I give to emergency managers now and that I would have given to myself at 25 is you are never going to know everything you need to know. Especially when you're dealing with life and death, it is difficult. I stressed a lot in my early career about just not knowing enough, and you keep learning and you keep learning, but you're never going to have all the answers because every call is different. And so if I would have known then what I know now, it would be that if you know the right people and you know the right processes, you can get through really anything that comes your way, because you're not going to be able to deal with the unknown. You're not going to know every problem. And that's true, I guess, for life too. We're always faced with things that we haven't had before. So having that mindset where you could just move through the chaos instead of trying to control it just took all the stress away. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, I can really handle anything that comes our way. And then COVID happened and we worked through that, which was like moving through chaos,
What was that like for you?
Well, actually, for us, I think we fared a lot better than a lot of other places because we've built our whole program around chaos theory, which is about kind of moving through the unknown. And so our EOC was able to adapt. We moved through the event pretty successfully. It was difficult, though. It was the most stressful time in my life, I think, the first month of COVID, just because of the unknowns and what we were seeing going on in Italy. But we had a really good team. We have a lot of fun in our EOC. And so we just made sure that we kept having fun. We solved the unsolvable problems. We brought in the right people to do those unknown events, or to solve those unknown events. And we moved through it. So now I think that we can move through really anything that comes our way. We just kind of, have some fun with it and put some ideas up on the wall and kind of brainstorm.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to pick up your book yet, but what's one of the biggest takeaways or something really profound that you're hoping people get out of it?
I really hope that everybody knows that it's okay not to be okay. And it's also, everyone faces struggle and hardship, but it's through kind of how you face that struggle and hardship and how you think about it, that you learn and grow. So every one of us is going to learn and grow from what we go through. But the bad times is our learning ground. It's where we learn the most. So I want people to see that there is beauty in everything that we face in our lifetimes. Anytime we have a wildfire here in Larimer County, I stop and I watch the sunset and sunrise, because you're never going to see anything more beautiful than a wildfire sunrise. But it's only there because there's destruction nearby. And I remember that, that there is destruction going on, but it's only because of that we see this beauty. So you got to take that time, stop and look at it. And I do think for any emergency responder, there is so much beauty that we see every day with dealing with patients and dealing with the people in our community, that you have to stop and take some time to face that so that you can kind of go forward in the new day and learn those lessons that life is supposed to teach you.
Yeah, I really like that you said that. I've actually never heard anyone else compliment the beauty of a sunrise or a sunset caused by the fire. But
It's just gorgeous.
I live in Southern California, so it's something that we get to see all the time, and it's there's nothing else like that. So
Right.
yeah, I love that, seeing the beauty and the chaos in that way. So how can people get a hold of you, and how can they get your book?
Well, I have a website, lorihodges.com. So it's just Lori Hodges, HODGES.com. And my book is available there, but it's also available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's available on some indie booksellers as well. So you can get it anywhere, there. And if you want a signed book, just reach out to me and I'll get you a signed book.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And Lori, thank you so much for coming on to our show.
All right. Thank you very much.